Hey Angie.
Hi.
Hi, how you
Hello.
doing?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm doing well. What about you?
I am still surviving. I think a
Okay,
lot
that's
of people.
great. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bobby Rose. Welcome to the Music Talks podcast. Today with me I have somebody that I've been wanting to talk to for so long. It's just that I felt like it's so hard to find the right questions to ask to share with all you listeners out there. And finally, we got to discussing, and now we're going to sit down and we're going to do it online because MCO is still happening. So, good afternoon, Miss Angie.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to you, Bobby.
Hi. How you doing? Is everything okay? Like, how's the MCO treating you so far?
I think this CMCO is kind of laid back. I don't really go out of the house often, so yeah, I've been using my time well and wisely. Yeah, that's
Nice.
mainly part of it.
So now is the second MCO. Is it like the same for you between April to July as it is now?
For April to July, I think it's more intense because I have to catch up with my assignments, and even for that semester, it's pretty taxing. But
Yeah.
for this CMCO, with Selangor, KL, and Putrajaya being all in CMCO, I think it's pretty okay for me because I don't really go out that often, and I've been doing well at home. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. It's so awesome for you. So you were saying like about your assignments and all. How's it going? How's like classes in general for you?
Um, for April until July, that period of time was last semester, and I took about 3 to 4 subjects. And even though it's taxing in some way, but it's rewarding at the same time because I get to see my work done pretty efficiently during that period.
Yeah.
And for mentally, I think it's more tiring because there's a lot of things that I need to catch up on. And compared to this semester, I think I've learned a lot of lessons during my last semester. So I've been doing well since it's the third week. And yeah,
Yeah. Oh, I'm
pretty
so
well.
happy to hear. I'm so happy to hear that. And
Yeah.
it's so funny that you say it's third week. In my head, it's week 13 already. I feel like it's passing by so fast. Ladies and gentlemen, for those that do not know, Angie and I are actually doing the same study. We're both doing music therapy. So our core courses and our dissertation are basically very similar. It's just that I asked because of the elective classes. So we tend to take some similar, some different elective courses, and so on. So Angie, speaking of music therapy, let's get down to it, okay? Because I have
Yeah.
no idea. I have no idea like what to ask you that doesn't make me sound, because it's basically so. If you don't mind, let's get like personal about it. How did it start for
Yeah.
you actually?
Wow, that's quite a few years back actually. So
Let's
let's
do it.
start all the way during high school
Uh
when
huh.
I was 16 years old. That was what, Form 4. So at that time, I had a friend who had interest doing speech therapy, and she was doing this kind of ongoing work with children who have communication issues. And at that time, I knew that I wanted to do music as a career, even at that time, because whenever I asked my friends when I was Form 4, like, what do you want to do in the future? They will be like, oh, I don't know, maybe I should go for A levels or foundation first, then maybe I'll figure everything out by then. But at that time, as young as 16, I knew what I wanted to do. And, but that time, music in my mind has such a broad range of occupation and field, and they range from composition, producing, and even performances and things like that. And I actually like performing, but It's just that I can't see myself performing for the rest of my life as my main source of income, you should say like that. And neither do I like conventional teaching because, as you can see from our peers, what they do part-time is teaching in music centers and things like that. For me personally, I did have experience teaching during Form 6, when I was Form 6, but it didn't last long because it's just not my cup of tea. Like, I wanted to have substance in music, you can say. And as soon as I heard, back to the story of my friend, as soon as I heard she was going to do speech therapy, and suddenly I have this wild thought of combining music and therapy, these two terms together, and try to figure out if it's really a real thing, like whether it could be practiced or be as a career pathway for me to venture in future, something like that. Yeah, so I wanted to do music therapy, and it's something that is not of the norm of what people perceive music career to be now, because like music to other people is like, okay, you go and perform or you become a pianist, and people in general, they just don't see music as a future career pathway. But when we say music therapy to them, they'll be like, oh, what's that? That's kind of intriguing to them.
Yeah, if not intriguing or whatever, they say, like, oh, that's a cool hobby.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
A cool pastime. So it's like, what?
Yeah, so moving on, Form 6, I did my own research, and then I actually attended this Singaporean-based non-profit organization or company that talks about music and healing. It was during about 2015 or 2016, somewhere around there. And then I did more research on music therapy, career pathway, because that's what initially came to my mind, and what are the pathways available in Malaysia. And I actually found out there are a few, which are like 2 career pathways. One of them is ICOM, which is International College of Music. I think that's in Sentul, because they actually offered 1-year foundation, doing like just basic music foundation, and then they will let you go to Berklee College of Music.
It's that
in
ADP
Boston
program.
Yeah. And you can actually do your music therapy degree over there. And the second career pathway is that you do STPM or whatever it takes for you to enter a local university, which in my case it's UPM, and or continue masters in other countries. So there is 2 kind of career pathways which I found out for myself, and yeah, that's about it.
Nice.
Yeah.
And just for all the listeners out there, in case you didn't know, ICOM is the International College of Music. That's like, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the most expensive program
it is.
in music.
It is.
It's yeah,
it
I mean, like,
definitely
you
is.
you can go to Berklee after that, or some people actually like make a plan to like make a deal with them, like go Juilliard, but still, like, to even get in there, to even survive on a Malaysia.
Yeah, because I remember I went to their open day, and because music therapy is a thing in Berklee, and ICOM is just the only way for your ticket to go to Berklee to actually do my degree, sort of like potential degree there. And when they actually briefed on the costs and tuition fees for you to go to Berklee, and even in ICOM, I was like, oh man, I just can't afford this. So the best way is just to go to a local route to enter STPM, and so forth.
Yeah. And it's a normal thing for a lot of people, not just like you. It's like generally, like, you have to choose either ICOM Berklee or you want to buy a house.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very a stark difference.
Yeah. So you did say that you were interested since like your high school, your Form 6, about this music therapy route, and you looked into the Singaporean. What was the first thing that you read about pertaining to music therapy? Was it like specifically music therapy and speech combination? Like, did you work with your friend? Are you still in contact with that friend?
Okay, the funny thing is that I actually don't really know about music therapy in the first place because, as I said earlier, I had this wild imagination of putting these two terms together. So at that time, to have a stable career is my first priority. So the first thing I read was more towards music therapy career prospects, because during my younger days, I felt like that career choice of mine in the long run is at stake. And finding out what music therapy has to offer, it's more of my first priority lah at that time. So, but other than that, as it goes along, as far as my memory can serve me well, that is. So I remember browsing through some articles, not necessarily academic articles, because at that time I was not really keen on reading academic stuff. So it's more like a blog article where they explain how music therapy can be used for facilitating movement and physical
informal
rehabilitation.
stories.
Yeah, just informal information to their readers out there, and how music therapy can also motivate their clients to cope with treatment and all these things, etc. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, do you think you personally, after meeting, like you've done your Form 6 and then now we're in our final year and fourth year, do you think a lot of people actually think about that? Or more specifically, like a lot of music students think about that? Like, how viable is whatever I'm studying now? Is it going to hold up in the future? Should I choose a different pathway? Do you think a lot of people think about that?
It depends actually, because it depends on what kind of field you're venturing into. Because for music, as young as I was when I was 16, I knew that music is not a easy pathway, because I've seen
Amen.
a lot of musicians, even my peers or older peers who I've worked with, who actually are in the industry, they are actually suffering as well. But not they show it on their face in that sense, but you just somehow know that there are some times where they are suffering even in the industry. So, but if it's for law or maybe medical, maybe they have a more stable, like a stable future where they can actually see where they are heading to, and they just, okay, I'm just going to go with it. And they just go all the way. Okay, for example, for medical students, they want to be a doctor, and they saw the end of the road already, like, okay, 10 years or 20 years from now, where will I be? So, that's
you
how
can really visualize it.
Yeah, they
like
can
A to
visualize
Z,
it.
not-
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned about the local scenes and the how it pertains to the field in Malaysia. How is it in Malaysia, anyways? Just to like let the listeners know. How, like now we've been doing it for a while. What do you think about actually doing music therapy in Malaysia?
In Malaysia, I think, for one thing is that in Malaysia itself, there is already a lack of awareness. Like even just talking to people, like saying, okay, for example, my mom always have to tell her friends what I'm actually doing, what am I pursuing in university. And she would say, oh, my daughter is actually pursuing music therapy. And then her friends will be like, oh, okay, what is that? And then like even explaining to your friends, you have to have the knowledge of what music therapy is. So that itself is a lack of awareness in that. Because if you say I'm pursuing law, okay, everyone will have a gist of, oh, you will want to be a lawyer, or you are going to open up a firm or something like that. But music therapy is so specialized that they have to sort of like crack their brains around, okay, maybe therapy, what kind of therapy, and how does music come into place, like that. And but even so, advocacy has been in place all the time, and it seems, or it's either people seem to have a rough idea of what music therapy is about, so either they know or they don't. So the don't part is usually like, oh, I think music therapy is like you play relaxation sounds on YouTube or things like that, and they have those kind of misconception around music therapy, and oftentimes we have to explain to them what music therapy is. Like, music therapy is not community musicianship, or music therapy is not listening to white noise or like sounds of waves or relaxation music in that sense. So a lot of times we have to explain, and that's how music therapy scenario in Malaysia as of now. But according to the webinar, because I also attended this webinar from the Malaysian Music Therapy Association just a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last month, I think. Yeah. So what the current president, I think her name is Shireen Tay, what she said is that music therapy has already exists in Malaysia since the 1990s. So actually, compared to the US, where they have at least 2 centuries, or rather 200 years of history, so music therapy actually came quite recent, or rather late in Malaysia. But then it has been slowly progressing, as in advocacy has been done, even with the first music therapy seminar that was held in 2015 or 2016. Do you remember that? The music and autism seminar. Yeah. So exactly. And following on with the Malaysian Music Cares, with the conference, and then leading on, and now we have actually a member from the World Federation of Music Therapy, and a committee member from the panel to work under the Ministry of Health. So I think we have came quite a long way, and we are still progressing, but at the same time, it feels like we are still being held back in a lot of ways, as in there is a short number of people who are actually venturing into this music therapy industry in Malaysia. And even in this association, I found out that we only have a handful of 15 people who are members of this association. So,
and you're talking about like board certified.
Yeah, exactly. So we are progressing, I think, in Malaysia, but there is still room for improvement, I think.
Oh, I think that I agree with you. There's a lot of room for improvement. It's just that I find that the tiring thing is that you're right. A lot of people just think that they put on some white noise, or they put on some relaxing mantras, and then they call it music therapy, or they have like drum circles, which you're right. It's not music therapy. That's not all it is. But I also have a tough time explaining to people that it is, but it's not. You know what I mean? Like it falls under the umbrella if it's done like as we always talk about it. It's if it's done with evidence-based methods, and it's done by a certified music therapist, then it's fine. But if you just randomly, So I think the tiring thing is not about the movement of music therapy in Malaysia per se, but it's the mindset of people that looks at music, which inevitably ties on to the lethargic evolution of music therapy in Malaysia. Don't you think so?
Yeah. So to back you up, I just want to give a more deep information for our listeners out there. So let me just quote what the American Music Therapy Association have to say what music therapy is. So music therapy is a clinical and evidence-based use of music interventions to accomplish individualized goals within a therapeutic relationship by a credentialed professional who has completed an approved music therapy program. So it's more on clinical and evidence-based. So if you don't have research to back it up, it's not really counted as music therapy.
Yeah.
Could I say that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's very and yeah, like that's very true. But the in simpler terms, it's just a difficult understanding for Malaysians at least. I won't
Mm,
speak on behalf of Asians. It's just they a lot of people in Malaysia can't seem to fathom the idea of the scientific side of music.
exactly.
I think
Exactly.
when you say like evidence based therapeutic goals, immediately they'll just go, hey, wait, this sounds like medicine. This sounds like psychology. This sounds like everything that's not music. So you can't call yourself a music student. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't make sense. So how do you usually tackle that?
Actually, that is still a difficult process actually, because it requires a lot of not just one way of just explaining it to them. Like they ask you what is music therapy, and then you just explain. You actually have to really sit down and really go in, not really deep, but actually give them the sufficient information they need to know what is music therapy. And even now, as I'm already in my final year, still explaining music therapy is a process for me
Yeah.
to carry on and explain further to people who do not know what music therapy is. And speaking of this, I actually came across this comment on the British Music Therapy Association Facebook page. And this comment actually sparked a lot of attention from music therapists themselves. So it says this, I think this citizen said that music therapy is wonderful, but it's quite clearly an elitist club. And perhaps this is the notion of what certain people thinks in the aspect of training or qualification, to practice, as well as the potential costs of accessing these therapy sessions. So I want to know, like, what do you think about this comment that music therapy is sort of like an elitist club?
Well, that's a very good discussion to be had. First of all, it and me personally, I found it very hard to accept, and it took me a long time to actually accept this fact that music, music, uh, music knowledge in general, not even music therapy, music knowledge first and foremost, it's a luxury because you can live without music, but I mean like as a human being you can live without music, you know what I mean? So in every school there has to be maths, English, BM, and music not being available is a normal thing as much as we don't want it to be.
Exactly.
So going back to that comment, there is some truth to it. There is some truth of elitism being present in the music therapy field, but
Exactly.
my thought on it would be, I guess that's why you and I are doing it, are doing what we do, relating to the music, the webinar that we attended under the New Zealand Music Therapy Association. How the big challenge is actually just to get funding or support from the government to make it like standardized for everyone. So it's not at least the small challenge is to make it so that, like the first step is to make it known, like you said, advocacy. So we want everybody
Yes.
to know what is music therapy. Next step is to build the field, and the third step, I think, like the highest helicopter, the highest altitude your helicopter can go is actually having it available for everyone. It's not just I mean, unfortunately, yeah, it happens a lot around the world. If you like go for, I don't know, scaling for your teeth, you pay $100. You do I don't know, medical checkups like a couple of hundred. But music therapy, it's quite expensive just because of the lack of people in it. And
Yeah,
also it's just because,
exactly.
yeah. So I guess yes, it is a form of elitism present, at least for now. But I guess, like I said, that's what we're trying to work towards it. What
Yeah,
about you? What?
because personally, I think that people would actually have this kind of perception is because they might not like I said earlier, they might not able to access to these sessions currently. But I think as part of the job as a music therapist, we ought to have the skills that are transferable to the patient and their caregiver, because from what I experience or what we have experienced is that commonly the questions frequently being asked is that can non-music therapists also practice these certain techniques, right? So I think because as music therapists, we might not be able to be there for the patient every hour, every minute, every second of the day. So it's for us as future or potential music therapists to have the skills that are able to be transferable to the patient and the caregiver, that they themselves can administer that particular intervention for the quality of life of that patient themselves. So that's one of my few thoughts about it.
That's fair. So now that you mention it that way, do you think like the international standards of music therapy, like you said, American music therapy, British music therapy, and like we talked about the New Zealand music therapy, is it like is there like a wide gap from where Malaysia is, or is it still a stone's throw away, so that we can get to that level?
That's very interesting because I've mentioned earlier that Malaysia has music therapy in place since the 1990s, because these music therapists, they are actually, who are based in Malaysia now, they are actually trained from other country associations, such as like American Music Therapy Association, the Australian, the British, the Japanese, like even Asako Matani, I think she is part of the Japanese Music Therapy Association, and they have their own standards of practicing in way that they all come together under the same roof of music therapy. And I think with that, they can actually optimize patients' quality of life and even improve their physical, their social, their communicative or emotional well-being in that sense, because all these skills that have come together are actually, we are not quite far off in terms of our practicing standards, because these therapies are actually based elsewhere, and then they actually took the liberty to come back to Malaysia to further progress on the music industry in Malaysia. So we are, I would say that we are kind of what do you call it?
Short-handed.
Kind of, short-handed of manpower, because there's only like just a few of us. But then again, the industry, would we have request or demand from other places or companies or schools that needed music therapists. So once the demand is there, I think there will be more music therapists in Malaysia can have potential job opportunities or better career prospects to continue doing or practicing music therapy in Malaysia. Because even with the current 15 that I mentioned earlier that we had, even some of them actually migrated to neighboring countries like Australia or Singapore, because over there it seems like they have more, they have better job opportunities there to continue further on their practice. So it's just that Malaysia just have to level up, have to progress and get that demand going, so that we have more music therapies in place in Malaysia.
I get what you mean. It's that chicken and egg problem whereby you don't have enough music therapists, so you would want more music therapists to actually help out with the field in Malaysia. But Malaysia itself has to grow, has to mature to want the field to grow. So, it's a circle that we seem to, if we cater for this side, then that side falls. Then we cater for that side, this side falls. So it gets tiring. But I like what you said about how even these 15 people actually migrate out because it's not their fault. I personally think it's
Exactly.
it's not like you know what, I'm done with this country, I want to get out of this country. No, they, like, you know what you talked about half an hour ago, it's logical to it, as a human being, the first thing you need to think about when you're working is money. I mean, like,
Yes.
financial security is one of the big things. As much as we want to be idealistic dreamers that, oh, you know, I don't need to get paid doing music therapy services or any services, but they actually migrate because there's more job opportunities. And
Yes.
if that's the case, do you think we should be approaching the people more than the government or the parties in Malaysia? Or like, what do you think? Like, how, because it feels like it's always been an uphill battle if we keep talking to doctors, talking to the specific sectors, and it seems to work, but it's only working like one-sidedly. Do you think like it will also make a big impact to actually just talk to everyday people, and in that sense, like, have I don't know, a music therapy festival? Do you think that will actually help?
More rather than a festival, I would say conference, conference or like seminars, which we have already, like did planned out during the past few years, like 2015 or 2016. But as you mentioned earlier, I think rather than an uphill battle, I think even with the ongoing work at Cheryl's Rehab Center, where we have assisted, or even in our university, in the Hospital Pengajar. So I think there are medical doctors who are already have a perception, I would say, or rather they have the knowledge that music can actually do certain things to the brain, or to help with traumatic brain injury, or these kinds of things relating to the body, or the developmental part of the brain, so to say. So I think I'm not sure, because in the US, they actually approach music therapists, like doctors will actually approach music therapists to actually go into the hospital and do treatments or interventions for these patients. But for Malaysia, I don't know as of yet, but unless that those doctors have connection to music therapists, or have the knowledge of knowing that music therapy actually existed in the first place.
Yeah.
Or there are music therapists in Malaysia. Then they might have the connection to begin with, and then continue on with that process of intervening with the patients and things like that.
Yeah. And just to add on your point, if there is music therapy or there is music therapist, but another challenge that they face is they, more often than not, they actually doubt, would a stroke patient, would a demented patient actually benefit from a music therapy session? Because like these people are in a lot of pain. So is music therapy really that strong? Yeah.
But then again, all is needed is research. It's either that upgoing battle that you said, where we have to approach them with research and evidence-based things, or it's either that, or they have to do their own research on, that music actually does help these patients. So it's either one or the other.
Yeah.
So,
but I guess for the second one, for the latter, like relying on people to do their own homework, I guess that's kind of tough.
yeah, especially for Malaysians. So there's a lot of work needed. As we say over and over again, there's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So.
Because it's even overwhelming, even like our juniors, like even when they enter this music therapy, I mean, it's not a music therapy program, but when they want to learn what is music therapy, then they get overwhelmed. You can't just Google what is music therapy and then like some 100,000 pages comes out at you and you don't feel overwhelmed. People will feel overwhelmed because there's a lot of things to actually know about it, internally as well as externally. That's the thing. So I'm just trying to gauge the viability of the field, both in long term and short term in Malaysia. Just a disclaimer for all you listeners out there. An Gie and I actually have been undertaking music therapy sessions as assistant music therapy because we're still students to an actual music therapist, and we've been doing it in Cheras Rehab last year for like 5 weeks, I think 5 weeks. Yeah. And not to pat ourselves in the back, but it's more of thinking for the clients, right? Thinking for the patients there. We actually got a letter from CRH about they can't disclose any information such as their heart rates were controlled, their cognitive decline was stabilized. They couldn't include those kind of information, but they did mention in the letter that was distributed throughout the team that there were significant improvements in emotional cueing, in socializing between themselves, and it's so heartwarming, you know. It's so heartwarming.
Yeah. Just to back up Bobby as well, we both are not just assistants in CRH, Cheras Rehab Hospital, but we also have experiences in dealing with dyslexia kids, and as well as traumatic brain injury patients, and even with other populations. So whenever we have the chance to interact with the music therapists that we are working with, we will definitely take that chance, because all these are valuable experiences for us as we build on to our postgraduate studies. So it's an exciting journey.
It is. It really is. And it's not just with other music therapists, because like you said, that's very scarce. But we do also take the chance to actually talk to doctors, and like there was I think it was last year. Oh man, this year went by so fast. I think it was last year, the one we went to HUKM. Then this year we went to HKL.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I feel like that too is it's important, because even doctors themselves, they like we said, they know what it is, they kind of see it, but they don't grasp it holistically. So even doctors, So now that we've talked about all that, how do you think new people, like people interested in this field, how do you think they can get into the field? Like I don't know, for example, like how do you think juniors can get into the field of music therapy, or starting with the habit of reading? Or we've been joining like webinars and like online classes. You want to talk? Let's talk about that.
Okay. I have a few tips actually, because based on my experiences in university, the first tip is that you have to be efficient in your work. There is no time and place for you to procrastinate. Well, you can, but it's always the matter of getting the job done or not. And oftentimes, even in music therapy, there are things that you need to get the work done there and then, or other stuff. But what I'm trying to say is that you can't procrastinate as much as you wanted to. So that's one. And another one is the habit of reading. You have to also have that initiative of browsing Google Scholar very frequently.
Yes.
Yeah, just type in anything that comes to your mind or anything that interests you. Just read up. And for me, what I've actually done with the habit during the last semester break is that I opened up a Google spreadsheet, and I started detailing each and every article that I've wrote, and what are the music therapy techniques that they used, how does it improve the patient's well-being, and what are the statistics that comes out of those articles and things like that. So that's one of the stuff that I actually did during my free time, as you can say. And the other one is that music therapy, especially for my dissertation, what I actually learned is that music therapy takes time. And there are certain things that needs time in order to process and go in progress, and there are things that you can't rush. Like, for example, things that has been assigned to you. And because I was that kind of person that likes to be efficient in my work, and sometimes I would tend to rush things. And some things can't be rushed, and that's one of the valuable lessons that I've learned. And even during your free time, it's really a good thing to go for additional lectures or classes, or even things on the internet. The internet is so vast these days, and you can Google everything through and from the internet. So whatever you do, even if you have a knack for music therapy, it's best that you actually do your own research in your own free time and try to venture more, because music therapy is not just dealing with the things that we said, like kids, with adults. Even there is music therapy for bereavement, for palliative care, for substance abuse. These kind of things is such a vast field out there in the world of music therapy. And even in music therapy, there is also music and medicine. So yeah, just take a time, especially for juniors, to really set aside time to venture into articles and even books. Well, Bobby has a ton of book listing or readings. So
I have, I do, but I don't read it.
So it just depends. It depends. You can, even in articles, there will be a quote from a certain book where you might have an interest in. So just venture. The field is so vast.
It really is.
Take the time.
And before we end, I just wanted to share with you and just wanted to ask you for your opinion. One of our juniors have been asking, has been like, I've been talking to her, and she was saying like, it gets so scary, like going into class and then suddenly you're like, because first and foremost, we're music students. So in our heads, it's something like, I don't know, C major, 251, bossa, samba, and whatever, Paganini, Franz Liszt, and then suddenly you go in and you hear terms like dementia, Alzheimer's, or stroke and TBI. So they get really overwhelmed and they just get discouraged. And so I was telling this girl, like, I don't know if you, Angie, feel it, but what I had to do a lot was just keep Google as my friend. Like, what is Down syndrome? What is autism? I mean, like, even till now, we've been working with dyslexia kids, but I still forget terms like music therapy, interventions for, different interventions for Down syndrome and autism. It's not just a one size fits all. And this junior was like getting so overwhelmed because she's worried she can't memorize the terms or whatever. And like you said, it's very true. It takes time not just to know it, but it's just like how music is. You need to practice and to actually muscle memory. This one is a different muscle memory, which is your synaptic, your literal memory. So it gets used. What was like the ultimate thing you did to actually know at the back of your head? Okay, this is Alzheimer's. This is dementia. This is Parkinson's. This is. What would you say? Like, it's your like number one piece of advice to actually get used to this medical side?
My number one piece of advice is that if you are feeling overwhelmed from classes from previously, so what would I personally would do is that I would set aside a few minutes of my time to reset back my whole thinking process and everything before that particular music therapy class. So for example, if my previous class is about musicianship and this upcoming class is on music and child development. So from musicianship, you'll hear like, okay, there's quavers, there's semi-quavers and the rhythm and so forth. And when the music and child development class comes along, I would personally set aside a few minutes of my time to just reset everything that I've learned earlier and just glance through my notes and get ready for the class. Just keep your mind empty and get going with new knowledge for the music therapy class. So the main keyword here is resetting your mind, your
Mindset.
your mindset. So that's one of the things that I personally do, which I think that might be helpful for her, maybe, because since she's a junior and she might still be, she's still taking classes, right? So
Yeah.
that might be a good idea or option for her.
Yeah. I just worry not only for her but like even for you and I, and even for our seniors, like one of the biggest things we actually experience is whiplash. Like you said, like the classes before, you're learning about harmony, you're learning about musicianship, and then suddenly you just have that big jump of suddenly medical side. So that's a very helpful advice that you mentioned.
Yes. Yeah, resetting your mind is very vital and important because it actually helps you to further to actually put in more knowledge into your brain, so to say. Yeah. That's all the best for that junior that you mentioned.
All the best to our juniors.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's right.
Like a lot. Yeah, we never know, right? There might be like more. Hopefully, we need the family to grow. Thank you so much,
Definitely.
Angie. Thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Bobby.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you here.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bobby Rose, and thank you so much for listening to the Music Talks podcast. This is me signing off. Thank you so much.